I'll move this, and seconded by Councillor Sayers in favour. Contrary, carried. Now, up to the working part of it, item 8, and we're going to welcome Phil and Ross. It's a hard time out there in the real world. I heard figures yesterday about the number of people behind on their mortgages, which is frightening, and 180,000 behind on their credit cards. It's by more than 90 days, and there's 460,000 credit card delays across the district. It's tough times out there. So Phil and Ross. Where's Ross? Oh, here he is.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll kick off as usual and hand to Ross in a moment. Just a reminder that sort of attempted to change the format of these to make them a little bit more time efficient, understanding that if questions are thrown up, I'm very happy and will stay behind after the meeting if councillors want to have a chat about it, any aspects, not to dissuade you from asking questions, of course, just to get through this in a timely fashion. I also acknowledge, and you will see from the agenda, you've got a quarterly performance report, which we'll come to in due course, so there's inevitably a little bit of overlap there, given one summarises progress for the 12 months, or for the end of the quarter, but coincidentally the end of the financial year coming shortly. And right, so the first point is just to acknowledge that we've finished at 30 June the financial year in good shape, as was forecast and as we've talked about in previous meetings. Favourable in terms of revenue, favourable in terms of expenditure, a good CapEx investment story there in terms of the projects completed and the expended, and savings were achieved. Noting that there will be a more fulsome report on the savings aspect to the Revenue and Expenditure Committee shortly, with final details there, but we met, in fact exceeded the target detail to follow. I acknowledge, and do so possibly before the Mayor mentions it, that one target in this area that wasn't met was the property sales target. That had been foreshadowed with you earlier, and it's really down to sort of market conditions, really, is the explanation I have for you, but we can dig into that. I know it's of concern to Your Worship. A few other headlines. In terms of service volumes, the number of people accessing our facilities, generally speaking, they are between 6 and 10% up on the 12 months previously. So quite a significant increase in usage of our facilities. Pools and leisure and libraries significantly, but also parks more generally. In that region of 6, 8, 10% increase. Satisfaction across our customer metrics is the same or better, and in virtually all situations is better than target, but in just about every situation the same or improved. The one thing I wanted to draw your attention to, and I normally do this because I think it's a good proxy for you to see what the level of development investment in the region is looking like. For the 12 months to the end of June, resource consents were 12% up on the previous year. So reasonably significant growth there, not pretending that things aren't subdued in that market, but a quite significant bump up from the 12 months previous. that translates to 16,300 odd resource consents processed through the organisation for the 12 months to the end of June. In other news, as you're aware, we went live on the 1st of July with the changes that had been planned in the CCO area. So those functions are now inside the organisation that were previously with Eke Panuku, the economic development activity from within Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, and a reallocation, if you like, of things in the events space. Probably what I would highlight is that takes care, if you like, of the structural change aspect of this. What we are working on now is how we take the Auckland Urban Development Office in particular and refocus it to some degree, recognising that we need to continue to honour and meet the commitments around the regeneration projects. That's of quite significant interest, obviously, to councillors in particular areas, and for the local boards that we keep faith with that program of work, so that continues. But there is other functionality for the Auckland Urban Development Office in terms of coordinating infrastructure investment in areas, working with developers and government, unlocking potential in greenfields areas and what have you. So this is where the attention from a change perspective is heading in that space. We had a very good workshop with key senior people across the council group on Friday last week to that end. Also, changes in the water services area were live. This has been a long piece of work, obviously, but I just acknowledge and thank all of the staff and Watercare themselves for everything that's gone into getting things to that point of them being financially independent, etc., from 1 July in place. Just in the final update in the CCO space is that we continue to expect the delivery of the Transport Reform Bill, the legislative changes, in August. I think around mid-August, but that's not directly in our control, obviously, but I'm assured that August is still the time frame for that to land. A couple of other things to report on the Recovery Office. Their work is on track with buyouts. There are 914 offers now accepted, and 832 of the buyout transactions are now complete. One thing I would highlight is that as we get further and further through that program, there is a number where we are still sorting out a level of disagreement with owners over valuations and other aspects of the scheme. Quite understandably, the more difficult of those sometimes get left till later because that's the nature of sort of navigating those difficult situations. We also have a number of situations which we are managing, and in a sense you don't need to worry about, but they do have the potential for media attention and such like, where we've had properties damaged after the 2023 events, or where people had not opted into the scheme who are taking issue with the fact that they're excluded. So we're working with those people, but it's fair to say that in some, I'm not talking about huge numbers, but there's a level of sort of disappointment from some of those homeowners about their exclusion from the scheme, but we're working that through. We're actively still rolling out the Better Value Principles program, bringing sort of a value for money lens to the whole of the capital program and beyond into some operational decision making. There's a program of work sitting behind that that's rolling out in the organisation right now. There is an item on your agenda today updating you on the regional deal with central government, so I won't repeat that there. Suffice to say that we're about to go into the negotiation stage of that process, and what the report today asks for is the appropriate mandate to get into those discussions, understanding that in due course that of course comes back to you to both direct and to approve at the end of the process. The only other thing I was going to mention or draw your attention to was the fact of the pre-election report having been released, I think, help me here, Ross, 10 days ago-ish. So in line with the statutory requirement, and we've not just released the report but done a bit of media and communication effort to make sure that that's known to people contemplating standing for office and for the wider electorate in terms of being informed about the issues facing the council in the future. I will stop there, Your Worship, and ask Ross to talk to the financial aspects.
Okay, good morning everyone. So the financials are discussed briefly in this paper, and then there's the next report. The next item on the agenda, the quarterly performance report, goes into the finances in a bit more depth. We are doing things a little differently this year. So normally at this part of the process, all of the financial results have to be kept in confidential because as we work through our annual report. So normally the monthly reports and quarterly reports will be all confidential, and the quarterly reports come through a bit later. We're changing that process to do things a bit earlier, and we've made an assessment around, or how is there anything in here that is significantly different, any sort of surprises that hasn't been flagged during the year and the previous monthly and quarterly results, and our view on that is no, there isn't, and so we've made an NZX disclosure to tell the market that we'll be talking about the quarterly performance, monthly performance in public. We'll be providing these as normal updates. But that said, all of these numbers are preliminary. They've got to go through the audit process, so the audit process will play out as per normal, but in the meantime we can talk about all these results in public for transparency purposes, because there's nothing sort of terribly surprising in here. The trends have just generally continued.
Well done.
So, as Phil's mentioned, the savings target's been exceeded for the year. Other things that have happened recently, the water care financial separation has gone live successfully on 1 July. So that now means that water care are on their own. They have to raise their own capital. We've got a treasury, we're providing a treasury function support for them, but they're in the driving seat. We execute on their behalf. The other ones raising debt in their own name, making their own calls on all of their financial and cash management. Water Care has completed the largest ever corporate financing, backed by an AA3 credit rating from Moody's, just one notch below the council. So it's a very strong credit result for Water Care that reflects the sort of strong financial management across the group, and that's enabled that to get off the ground and meet that 1 July timeframe. So it was quite an ambitious timeline to get that up and running, and that's been achieved now, and we're up and running. Another thing in the financing space is the council has issued a new sustainably linked bond. So it's a bond that's raising money as per normal bonds, but it's got some linkage to some sustainability target, and that is the native Ngāhere or forest restoration program. So there are metrics attached to that bond around planting trees. Normally with these things, if we don't hit the target, we have to pay a little bit more interest. This is a little different. So if we don't achieve that target of planting a certain number of trees, we have to make donations and then more trees get planted. So that means that investors who buy these bonds can be confident that a certain outcome will be achieved regardless. So it's quite an innovative new approach in terms of issuing bonds with a strong focus on sustainability. I've mentioned the work on the annual report. In terms of the numbers, a bit more detail in the quarterly. CapEx delivery is strong, so the preliminary results for the year, 94% delivery across the group, so just over $3.9 billion delivered for the year. Some highlights for the month of June. Auckland Transport has tested the first fully electric ferry on the water. The Great Barrier Trawhina Wharf renewal project has been completed. There's flood recovery works underway in Murray's Bay. for healthy waters, and for council, the Tipping Point Community Recycling Centre has opened attached to the Waitakere transfer station. So just a few key highlights there. In terms of the revenue and expenditure, as Phil said, they're all pretty favourable. They continued the trends through the year. We've seen revenue, the direct revenue, so the controllable revenue, excluding rates, etc., 2% favourable to budget, so 64 million favourable across the group. Largely regulatory revenue, but a waste revenue, port revenue stronger than expected, and water care's growth charges, all a bit stronger. So 2% favourable underlying revenue. On the cost side, 1% favourable, or 50 million favourable for the year to date. So some of that is public transport contracted costs a bit lower, less spend on the Waikato District Council water contracts, and just general sort of cost containment as well. So overall, across, in the net direct, so revenue and expenditure, an overall 114 million favourable to budget when we look at those direct lines. We will have that full picture. The GAP compliant results will come through in the annual report, and that'll come to the governing body in September for adoption, which will include all the accounting adjustments, provisions, rates, the full picture of it. So we've seen a debt number for the year, preliminary number is about 14.1 billion, so very close to the budget of 14 billion. We've seen CapEx, because it's only 94% delivery against budget, it's about 270 million under, and that's been broadly offset by about 270 million less capital revenue. That includes the lower properties, lower asset sales, as Phil mentioned, also some lower development contributions, lower capital subsidies from a slightly smaller transport program, and some insurance recoveries that will be delayed and will come in in the current financial year. So we've seen lower capex and lower capital revenue, but debt broadly on track, very close to budget. So those are the key updates for the month. Happy to take any questions.
We've got a few here. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. Just about the house removals. I just wanted to make the comment to the Chief Executive that there is a bit of problem raising in West Auckland where the properties, once the house is gone, aren't having residual rubbish, which was not part of that house, taken away. And there's, I've brought it to council, but there's quite a lot of debris and stuff lying around that would float down the creeks that caused flooding last time. So if we could really look into that, it's important. Earlich Road is one in particular. And the other question I just had, and maybe not for you, Ross, but with all this tree planting, and I have asked for planting programs, but I'm seeing us, particularly in regional parks, planting on the flat, usable areas which have other public attributes, and not planting on some of the steeper, hillier stuff that could genuinely do with, for other reasons, be planted up. So, I'm just worried that we're going to go planting for planting's sake, which, without considering the other ramifications that that can have. Have we got something in place of how we're going through all this planting?
So we have targets around the quantum of planting, the bit around where we're planting, flat slopes, slopes versus flat bits. I can't comment. I'll have to follow up with the relevant Environmental Services Department or whoever's doing that and come back to you on that one.
Well, what I would say, Mr. Mayor, is that over a decade ago, I was offered to graze some land for a decade, and that every year they would plant 10% of it up. This is right out on the coast. They would plant 10% of it up, and then it would be all sorted and planted. That was a decade ago. I haven't grazed that place for a decade. There's not one tree being planted for that decade. I can take you and show you the kikuyu is still chest deep, and yet we're planting on flat areas which are picnicable, people can use it for other issues. So we've got a hole there we need to fill. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thank you both. Some good information here. My question is to you, Mr. Chief Executive, and it's just on something that you didn't mention, and that was the performance of AEM. I would just like you to give a bit of an overview on that. I know some councillors have visited the new AEM office in town, they, in the recent storm, not talking about the tsunami, they did a good job there too, I think, but in the rain that we've had, they are doing an excellent job keeping Auckland safe. The technology that's available in that room now, and the team that they have there is, pretty special. And I would say to all councillors, if you haven't gone and had a look, do. There's a lot of photos you cannot take inside that room, but the ones that you can, you can actually see what's going on everywhere. They highlighted certain catch pits and streams that they know to flood, and it's a really, really good visit. I think Councillor Newman, you've been, haven't you? Councillor Hills, I think you've been as well. It's great. So just maybe next time give a bit of an overview on how the improvements potentially have gone in that department, because it's. Oh, sorry, Councillor Joe. Oh yeah, she's. See, there we go. So maybe just cover something on that.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm always a little bit cautious about crowing in the emergency management space, because you know that we're just round the corner from the next event, and they, by their nature, they are challenging, and I won't say chaotic, but I think you get the picture that things in the emergency context never run totally smoothly. Am I confident that we're a lot better prepared? Yes, I absolutely am. And I acknowledge the councillors' support for the additional resources that have gone into our emergency management response. I'm pleased with where it's at. The team have done a really, frankly, awesome job. The facility on level 4 of Albert Street is first class, and I might say the envy of others around the country. It's not my opinion, that's a statement from Dave Gawn, the head of the National Emergency Management Agency. We're in much better shape. We've trained a very large number of staff now. We've improved the systems that are in place. And I think I'm right in saying that about 20 out of 21 actions in the work program that was set out have now been completed following the 2023 events, and we're making good progress through the longer term plan. This is regularly reported to Councillor Stewart's committee, who I also acknowledge and thank for your support in this regard, but I'm pretty pleased with the progress. More work to do, but it's in good shape.
Sorry, maybe just to add, we've got that department down on the list of service and review performance to come to the Rev Committee in the near future as well, so it's an opportunity to do a deeper dive.
I think Councillor Stewart might want to comment.
No, I'd like to also acknowledge Adam Maggs and all of his team, and if you haven't seen, later on, let's get through this emergency and everything, but if you haven't seen the technology and all the vehicles and all the equipment and everything, it's really worth having a look at. And I think we're extremely lucky to have people like Adam Maggs and his team. So nothing more to say, but thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Philly, please.
Kia ora, thanks Phil and Ross and your team for your presentation and your hard work backing us up in our community. Just wanted to commend all of our Auckland Council whānau for those good stats in terms of our libraries and our leisure centres. Those are hubs for our communities. So it's really good to see that after COVID, those numbers are going back up as well. My question relates to the buyouts. As you know, I brought to your attention some negative media stories that were out there, in particular about the Mangere buyouts. Just wanted to follow up whether you were able to pick those up and whether they're included in the group you're talking about that your team's working with.
Yes, I'm aware of the scenarios you're talking about, and yes, they were followed up, both sort of generally and in some quite specific cases where we're aware of some unhappiness. I think we've made quite a lot of progress, and I might say in terms of future-proofing with the engineering works in the Mangere area, I think there's good progress there too, because they were first cabs off the rank in terms of those big community infrastructure projects. Yeah.
Kia ora. Thank you.
For that, Councillor Sayers, please.
Hang on, caller. What's going on there?
I just restart.
All right, mate, thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you. Look, Mr. Chief Executive, thank you so much for these opportunities, and also the CFO. You know, always very candid, and have to say, you know, quite positive over this last 12-month period in terms of what you're able to report back to us. But look, my question's around, and the Mayor opened with it, about the pressures that are on Aucklanders at the moment, the defaults that are happening, the pressures that are out there, you know, generally around the cost of living that people are experiencing. And I've just been out door knocking, and you know, we've had this 5.8% rate increase, but some people, even retirees on fixed incomes, are experiencing, you know, up to 30% increases, just the way the formula works. So, I mean, it's been very helpful for you and the CFO to touch on moving forward your thoughts around, you know, the continued savings that are going to happen there, because those have a flow-on effect to keeping their rate increases down. But, you know, for next year, I think we're budgeting around 8.8% average rate increase. So, look, just from your perspective, could you just help the table around, with central government, you know, I've heard talk around rate capping rate increases. I've heard about them taking the full well-beings out, presumably to reduce costs on councils. I've heard about you know, the potential of local government New Zealand being restructured and better forums for councils to deal with central government, and we've also heard about the regional deals, Phil. So, in terms of your position as Chief Executive, looking forward, what are the opportunities, if any, there to keep the pressures on our rate increases down, or ability to forward look at the annual plan next year? You know, and for example, I think why we've got such a big increase next year is the CRL costs coming on board. You know, yet we're going into a regional deal conversation very shortly, you know, with central government. You know, is there ability within that for them to be stepping up to the mark to be able to help us out more with the city rail link costs or not? So it's a broad question, Phil, about you looking forward from your position about with a role with central government. You've explained what we're doing internally, but in terms of the other opportunities with central government there, could you just paint a picture of how you see that future looking?
Gosh, that's quite a big question, Councillor Sayers. In simple terms, I'd have to suggest we're going to have to sort of temper our expectations in terms of additional central government financial support. I think they've been pretty clear on that point. So, to some degree, the lumpiness, the city rail link related costs that flow through next year and are a big part of that. That's sort of higher than we would like rate increase next year. Some of those, I'm afraid, are pretty unavoidable. The question underneath it, in terms of how hard we can drive the organisation to find other savings and offsets, given that reality, well, I have to say we're pushing things quite hard at the moment. Around 50% of the savings that we've achieved this year, they are definitely repeatable. You know, we've made the changes that mean that they will have an enduring positive effect in terms of the budget. But of course that means that half aren't, and we've got other things that we need to look at in the organisation to keep that pressure on. So I know I make this point regularly, but we've already banked in advance the fact of those savings. In addition, you're aware that we've taken on the challenge of meeting some additional costs in this financial year to help local boards with those inflationary pressures that would have otherwise eaten into the increased budgets or into their budgets. So I'm cautioning you in terms of expectations of a whole lot more savings opportunity in the short term. Now, the key point here, and I'm sorry for the long answer, but the key point here is that there's a limit to how much in the way of savings I can find without impacting service levels. And that, therefore, is a conversation for all of us around this table, significantly yourselves, because I totally regard the question of policy and service levels. In a democracy, that's for you to determine and for you to give direction around, and it'll be that pressure that you'll be confronted with in the annual plan round. Not sure I can say much more at this stage. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Phil. I guess I was also, part of my questioning was around potential legislative changes that are coming through. Is there any update in those areas that may be helpful?
I beg your pardon. I think what I'll do is I'll communicate with you offline about what we understand about the government's legislative program if you're referring to the local government specific changes around role and rate capping, rather than here. Probably the point I would make is that and it's not to be defensive of those community services that always come into the spotlight when we're having a conversation about core business and for well-beings and rates capping. But I would remind you that that element of our costs is probably smaller than most people think. I mean, 30% of our budget is transport related and so forth, right? So you're talking about a potential lever that has a very real impact on the community, but in financial terms is not the biggest slice of the pie to be managing. So that's a discussion that we're going to have in due course, and I'll communicate with you offline about the government's legislative program.
Very good. Well, thank you for the thoroughness of your answer there. It's appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think you've got to remember that next year's increase is $220 million for operating a CRL. So that was baked in by decisions made some years ago when we decided to build CRL. So to save that $220 million, we're not going to build it and not have anybody on it. So you'll just have to explain to some of those rates caps people, there are some facts out there. Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you. Got a couple, just in terms of stream maintenance and whatnot. Firstly, leading off that I'd asked for advice on the financial levels of service for stream maintenance. Just wanted to bring that back to the top of your radar, that when people are advocating for more maintenance, we need to know the financial impact, and I'd like to know that. Just in line with the debris being left behind through house removal, an issue for Waitakere. Contractors, of course, need to be reminded that they need to keep sites clear, but these sites also seem to be attracting illegal dumping. So I'm just wondering if you've been made aware of that issue and what measures we're planning to do to handle that problem.
Yeah, I have been made aware of it, and the recovery officers, I suppose, strategising around it, regular inspections and so on. There's a related problem with those sections that haven't been cleared yet, being vandalised and becoming a problem in terms of antisocial behaviour and vandalism and such like. So, yes, and I'll definitely come back to you. I can see the general manager of the relevant area sitting in the background, so we might want to grab him at morning tea time, but I'll come back to you more formally about the stream maintenance costs.
Fabulous, that's fantastic. I suppose it's another one for Craig, but are we working with businesses and adjacent streams to educate them on the importance of keeping them clean? Because I remember that was a big thing we discovered from the floods, that some of that waste that was blocking up the stream was businesses.
Yes, that's very true. I'm aware of a number of situations. The answer is yes, but again, I might prevail upon Craig to give you a more fulsome answer.
But hey, thank you. Last one from me, and it's to Ross. With the rates rebate scheme widening and more people being eligible, could we just get some advice on on that, what the impacts are going to be and any fiscal impacts as well that may or may not come to us. So it could come in a memo if it's maybe better, because we've got to get that out to the community.
Yeah, I don't have the facts and figures to hand. So it's a government-funded service, so we don't have to pay for the top-up. But if the volumes increase, there's a little bit more admin cost for us. So it's a small admin cost, but I think it's a very valuable thing to do. One of the challenges with the rates rebate scheme is that people can only get it if they apply for it. It's not automatic. And so by the government widening the criteria and having many more people that are on New Zealand Super eligible, there is a lot more relief out there for people that are struggling, but only if they know about it and only if they apply. So anything we can do to get the word out is helpful.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors and ladies and gentlemen. I have a question and two items, brief items of information. The first item of information, good news, construction on the St James Theatre project will get underway in earnest on 15th of September. And so the work will increase in scope and velocity over the following months. So that's good news. A question, I think, to the Chief Executive. There was, on this agenda item every month, an economist report, very succinct, but it contained valuable metrics about the state of the economy, Auckland in particular, and in particular, the city centre, including foot traffic and employment and all the rest of it. And I just wonder, it seems to have disappeared, and I just wonder, perhaps the economist is on leave. So my question is, will it be brought back to enable us to have this quite vital information, particularly for the city centre for myself?
Thanks, councillor. I have to confess that in trying to shorten this session a little bit in view of your overall agenda, that was one of the things that we agreed, was that the economist would be here if needed rather than as a matter of course. But I take the point, and clearly if the councillors have a view that they would like that, then we'll respond. In making that decision, Gary Blick did undertake to make sure that outside of the meeting there was a regular update for you in terms of the state of the Auckland economy. So we'll make sure that happens.
I'll leave that to one side. Just another piece of information, as I've notified you, it has been pointed out to me what appears to be defects in the way item 9 in the Planning and Policy Committee meeting held last week was managed, particularly the nature of the mechanism to reach a decision. Does not appear in our standing orders. And so without prejudging the situation, I understand that I'll be meeting with management to discuss my concerns. If the mechanism used was not legitimate, that's a breach of natural justice, but it also means that the decisions reached, including an approach to the Environment Court for a declaratory judgment, which properly belonged in the following item, but nevertheless, it means there's a question mark on the legitimacy of those decisions. And if you like to give insult to injury, in the minutes, myself and the seconder of my notice of motion, Councillor Leone, are recorded as the mover and seconder of the very questionable substitute or replacement notice, replacement motion. And that is not true. And if it remains in the minutes, that is will not be a true and correct record of that meeting. So hopefully there's an innocent explanation to all of this, but Ms Wilson, I will be writing to you today or tomorrow, which will go into this affair in much greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I acknowledge your concern, and I can assure you we'll work through it formally and respond formally to you.
Councillor Filipino, are you there?
Morena koutou, here mana morena chair to the councillors, our kaimahi, our staff, also members of the public. Talofa Phil and tēnā koe Ross. Phil, first question to you. Can you tell me at what stage will you come back to the governing body, and I'm assuming to the local boards as well, in regards to the savings, the targeted savings that have been agreed? I remember, I think the last governing body committee meeting, you outlined that you wanted to have a discussion at a workshop around, savings year in, year out. So Phil, when is that? Do you think it'll happen before the election or after? That's the first part to you, and then I've got one for Ross.
Talofa, Councillor Alf. I think what you've suggested probably should happen in two parts. There is a summary of the savings effort, a fulsome summary going to Revenue and Expenditure Committee shortly. Ross might just remind me of the date, or the August meeting. So I think what we should do is package that up and share that more broadly with the local boards after that. The other aspect of your question, though, goes to the approach to savings, how they're incorporated in budgets and what have you. I think that's a matter that we should pick up as we move into the next annual plan round. So the answer is probably post-election, late this calendar year.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Ross, question to you, and this is in regards to the properties that had to be abandoned at the floods in Cyclone Gabriel. I don't know, and I don't recall, but the rates on those homes where the occupants, the owners had to leave, wasn't occupied, were they still obligated to pay their rates even though they were not in their house or homes?
So for last financial year, there was a decision made by the governing body, I believe, to provide rates relief, and that was based off anyone that was unable to access their property. They wouldn't have to pay rates for that period. From the start of this financial year, now that we've got the revaluations done, and category 3 buyouts have progressed, we've kind of moved back to a more normal situation. But many people's property, so people that have been bought out, or it's not their, won't be their property anymore, and ones that are equally other ones that have been severely impacted and have much lower valuations, that is accurately reflected in their values and their rates going forward, whereas that wasn't the case last year. So it's a different approach this financial year to last financial year.
Okay, so are you the person that I need to follow up on some of the homes in Mangere or in the Manuka ward that both Councillor Rotu and I represent? Do we need to then contact you, or who shall I contact around those homes in the last financial year that weren't inhabited as a result of the anniversary floods in Cyclone Gabriel?
If you contact me, I'll make sure that those are looked at appropriately.
Hilda, thank you. Thank you, Herman.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks. And I take the point of the Chief Executive from an earlier meeting about being pretty sharp in this session. But look, mine's just a $1.34 billion question. And Chief Executive, I appreciate the conversations you've had with me 2 weeks ago, but look, it's now 8 months since the council sold its second tranche of the airport shares. The Auckland Future Fund chair confirmed that the proceeds are largely on deposit at low interest rates. we're awaiting the appointment of the Global Investment Manager. That process is now into its 7th month. Following my inquiry in June, there was a memo that went out to all councillors saying the decision was going to be at the end of June. And then there was a media story, I think early July, that said the decision was imminent. I think that was the 9th of July. We're now at the end, a very last day, I think it is, of this month. And I'm mindful that this is a critical decision, and we've got to get it right, or they have got to get it right. I understand that the board has hired Mapua Wealth, but they're on a 1-year contract. Now, my concern is this going to run longer? And I think we need much better information coming to the governing body on $1.34 billion of our money. So what is the timing of the decision? Do we have any updates on that? Because we're well past the deadlines that have been given to us by the Auckland Future Fund Chair.
Point of order, Your Worship, apologies. I can assure you that it's the decision of the Chair of Auckland Future Fund, but a decision should be coming out today or tomorrow publicly.
Well, that's good to hear. Is that what the Chief Executive has been told?
Sorry,
I can't confirm whether the CEO has been told, but I can confirm that there will be a decision announced this week.
So what is the reporting line here?
Sorry,
Sorry, I'll refer to you now, Phil. I just needed to correct that.
okay. It is consistent with what I understand of the situation, first point, and Ross might want to comment as well. I'm not sure how far you want me to get into the reporting line question, Councillor.
It is, look, it's really irregular for a councillor to have that information, and I don't think you have it, Chief Executive. I certainly don't have it, and the second tranche was sold a long time ago, and we're going backwards, and in my analysis, at about $1 million a day by it not being invested. And I think it's a big issue. We talk about a lot of small issues here. I'm talking about a big issue, $1.34 billion. And I don't think the transparency... I'm sorry, but I'm sounding a little bit niggly here, but this is a big one. This is not about road cones or potholes. They're important, but $1.34 billion. Look, maybe I'll just leave it there. I think we've got to do better on this. We need to understand this better, and there needs to be more timely information. If this is the Auckland Future Fund going forward, it is not good enough.
Look, I register the concern. I mean, I obviously share your concern about the stewardship of that very significant fund. I've been assured that the board is working on it. Strictly speaking, the board is accountable to you through the CCO committee. But Ross, do you want to comment?
Yes, so the board's accountable to the governing body. The advice I've had is it is still imminent. It is, as you say, it's a big decision, it's a complex decision, and that's why the board is taking the time to get it right. They're in the final stages of negotiating complex arrangements, getting fees and everything that needs to be sorted right, because it is such a big, significant decision. And that's the advice. It will be out imminent. Councillor Fletcher is a liaison councillor and attends the board meetings, so she's a bit closer to it. The reporting line is obviously to the governing body. But yeah, hopefully very, very soon you'll get the announcement and you'll be advised of what's happened.
Councillor Watson, please.
Phil, just want to return to the buyout, and you referred to
some of the publicity and some of the stories that are coming through, and a couple of which happen to be in my ward. And I've just got a few questions that go to us. Well, I won't get into individual cases, but which go to type of situation, I suppose, and that's where there's been like units or blocks of flats, and where maybe one unit has been bought out under the intolerable risk to life, yet the ones next door to it are not. And I guess there's three questions that come out of that, aside from the potentially devastating effects on people's lives. And I know it's been a massive operation, and that most people have felt very grateful for the council's intervention, but we do have these specific cases now. I understand it's has been shut for a while as far as new applications go. So there's just really three questions that come to me from a couple of these instances that I'm aware of. Is one, have we found out how people didn't really realise that they had that option and didn't pursue it? Because in the cool, clear light of day, logically, there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't come into the scheme. Yet, obviously, there's a couple of people who haven't. In some cases, claiming they didn't receive a letter. In other cases, saying they didn't quite realise the implication of the intolerable risk to life. So one, have we found out how on earth these outliers, how these people just didn't realise, and all the communication that was going backwards and forwards? That's number one. Number two, we are in a unit next to another unit. I'm assuming their valuations have plummeted right down. If there's a unit next to them that's been condemned, you assume then their value is down to 100,000 or whatever it is. And three, what is the council plan for dealing with these empty units that may or may not be subject then to vandalism or disrepair that affect the other units?
Thank you, Councillor. As you'll appreciate, I've got to kind of answer that in the general, as it wouldn't be appropriate to talk about specific instances. And probably important to preface it by saying there are a lot of situations where, of course, there's sympathy for the people and the effects on them, property values and a number of other considerations. And frankly, there's also sympathy for people who are subject to events post 2023 who aren't entitled for any consideration at all. So I'm mindful of that. The answer is that every one of those situations has to be looked at on its merits and carefully. We have made efforts to understand what the communication has been with those owners. It has been the normal practice, so again, this is general, and we do have situations where people indicate they haven't been communicated with. We've got others that acknowledge they have been communicated with, but don't feel they were in a position to make an informed decision earlier. You've got some people who were communicated with, made a conscious decision, and now regret having made that decision, having found out what's happened to properties around them. So there's quite a variety of situations there, and we're looking at each one to understand those. Quite clearly, therefore, where we've bought one property and another one is next door and the property value's been affected, that has shown up in the latest rating information, and it's brought to light the reality of the situation for some people. I'm not sure we have a response to that other than to acknowledge it's the reality for some people. The recovery team, specifically the team that Linda Greenolch is leading, is leaning into that in terms of communication with folk and providing what support might be available. I think the final aspect of your question is what's happening to those properties. The recovery team are working to the policy that was agreed round here in terms of what happens to those properties. In some cases, they will be able to be re-inhabited, but only if certain work is done. For example, there are multi-storey or two-storey blocks in some situations where they had habitable rooms on the ground floor and others did not next door, and therefore they had a different outcome in terms of the categorisation. And it might be feasible to convert the bottom in order that it can be sold, and we'll be looking to do that. Your guidance to us is that we should, where possible, where safe and appropriate, we should be recovering some of the investment in these properties. But there's honestly, there's a whole range of situations there. I might suggest, councillor, that we spend some time offline afterwards, or for any councillors that have got some of these specific situations popping up in your areas, I think we should sit down and have a conversation about it. Yeah. I'll happily bring Recovery Office and other folk into the room to have that conversation with you, if you could follow up with me after the meeting.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. So this isn't a very big expenditure, but it's big enough. I just wonder, can we find out when the Auckland Council's property arm, Ikapanuku, is going to get the $3 million for the CAB building across the way? Apparently, it was back in March 2024. It was 8 years in March that it was sold, and there was a deal done through Ikapanuku. Personally, I've never heard of a deal like it, where you haven't got a finite time where you're going to receive that $3 million for an 18-storey building, where apparently they've got a $16.5 million apartment on the top that I'm not sure whether it's sold yet. Back in 2023, it hadn't been sold. So what I think we've all been told is we won't get that $3 million until all the apartments are sold. Surely we need to get somebody to go and have another conversation, because, it's only $3 million, and I don't know how many apartments have been sold, but I do think it's something that I would like to find out before I finish around this council table, that we have got a date where they will have to come up with the money, because honestly, I've never heard of anything like it ever before in my life. And I think something needs to be done. It just can't keep on hanging in there, and it's a 20-year plan, and the $16.5 million apartment still hasn't sold, so we haven't got that $3 million. So it's only small money, but it's something we need to look at. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor. Obviously, that property functions now inside the organisation and with me, but I don't have the information here, so I will follow up and communicate with you separately.
Good question, councillor. Probably were a good reason why we shifted away from Ikapanuku, nevertheless. I do recall you were the one person who cleverly voted against that, listing that as a listed building. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, good morning. And Phil, I've got a quick question about process. I will stick with the generalities rather than the specifics, but it's to do with almost the opposite of property acquisition. It's of surplus properties. When Eastern Busway Stage 1 was completed over 4 years ago, there were still some properties that were left over of no need anymore and could have easily been disposed of. what's amazing is that some of them are residential buildings that could have been sold as a dwelling for people to live in, have dramatically dropped in price in the last 4 years just because house prices have dropped. I guess the question I really want to know is there a central person or manager or general manager who has the role of coordinating with all of our CCOs, because the debate has gone between Iki Panuku, no, it's not ours, we don't have the ownership papers, then AT say, well, we've not been given them, so we can't do this, or we haven't been told we can dispose of it. I believe it is going to come before the governing body next month, but over 4 years of property sitting empty, dwindling away in value, is there a person who actually has the management and control of all of our property portfolio, and it flags them in their computer saying, this is ready for disposal, and that within a month or 2 months, that is ready to go on the market, try to get the maximum price for it?
Thank you, Councillor. There are a few exceptions to this given the kind of CCO landscape, but in the round, yes, it's with the property department recently created, sitting in the resilience and infrastructure area, with a general manager having now been appointed to that role. So the answer is yes, and we can get that person onto the issue that you're talking about.
Would really appreciate it. Thanks, Phil.
Councillor Leone, please.
Thank you. I was also just going to talk about the CCOs and just going back to the attachments on point 22, just referring to the 2.4 million of the budget to be reallocated given Eki Panuku and Tataki have come back in-house. So do we know whether we have actually saved any money since they have come back in-house in terms of that transition that's occurred? That's my first question.
Oh, we're confident, yes, we're confident we've saved that money. Just to understand the way that these change processes work, there is a payback period because there have necessarily been some redundancy costs and so on in the transition. Okay, but there is, when you annualise it, there is a bit over $2.4 million, and the reallocation of that is as per my agreement with you earlier.
Okay, and the second question is just about the strategic gaps that have been identified in terms of the economic development, destination and major events and urban development, because I can see that you've got a report that's going to be done to come back to the Planning Committee in September. In terms of that piece of work, because obviously I know that the big concern was for councillors to have better oversight of the work that they're doing. Do you think that that's, so from September onwards, that's when we're going to basically have more oversight of the work that they're doing?
Well, you've got more oversight of that work now, effectively. What that strategy work speaks to is clarity about what outcomes you want from those functions, what you want them to achieve for you in terms of urban development outcomes, economic development outcomes. So that's more a question of looking forward in terms of what you are expressing to those areas in terms of what you want them to focus on. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you. Just on the recovery office, I have had a number of issues like that, but the staff have been pretty amazing around the issues with people being connected or not being bought out with their neighbours being bought out. So they have done a lot of work in that space, so hopefully they can continue that. First is a question on the vested assets. There's a comment, and maybe I've missed it in a previous, but less or fewer assets coming from the City Rail Link over to Auckland Council. Is that what was? Do we have a bit more information on that?
So City Rail Link, there's some big assets that will come later when the project's closer to completion, but there's been some assets along the way generally ones outside of the main stations, Britomart and other places, and those have been transitioned across as things progress. Some of that's just had a timing change, and some of it earlier, some of it later. So that's purely timing rather than anything else.
Just a timing issue. Thank you. Just on the question, there is concerns around things like stage 2 for Waido and other making space for water projects. I assume, or I hope, there's work being done in the background for the new council to consider other projects as part of the annual plan and LTP. Like, does Healthy Waters start proposing basically a bid for capital works for us to make decisions on, or do we have to start officially making those before we have an ability to do that?
We can get Craig to talk to that at an appropriate time. You know, a lot of focus on the current ones and the early stages, but I'm well aware that Craig is thinking about the longer term, the bigger picture. What does the city need overall long term? So there's plenty of thinking going on more broadly around climate resilience and what is needed in the future. So that thinking is going on. That will have to be fleshed out and developed to feed into the next LTP. So we won't wait until that period to look at it. There'll be ongoing work as we progress.
Thank you. I've just got some quick fire questions just because the silly season is upon us and a bit of misinformation happens. But what was the savings made this year in total? What's the expected? Is it around 100
So the target was 66 million. We achieved that target 3 months early, and so it's more than that. So we're looking at a figure above that. We were still going through the final numbers. We'll have a full report to the Rev Committee, and we'll get really specific about the exact numbers at that point.
It'd be good to have a rates percentage on that too. So I think it ends up being another 5 or 6% rates would have been if we hadn't saved that. The other one is on our debt to revenue. So we got up to what, 285 or something at one point in COVID, but we're down to, is it 240 we're expecting this year, debt to revenue?
I think a little bit less with water care dropping out. So I think 220, 230. We'll just finalise those numbers as we work through the final audited annual report. But yeah, it's very much in line with budget as things are coming down and as water care moves out. But there's a lot more debt headroom there now than there has been previously.
Okay, so our main measure of debt, we had a cap of 270, we moved it to 290, but we're actually down below 240, we're hoping.
Yes, we're targeting being below 250, and we're closer to 220.
Well, the other one on the physical, sorry, the billions. The reason we're increasing debt this year is largely due to it's part of, or about a third, or even half of the capital investment we're doing, right?
Yep, so about 1.3 billion increase in debt is attributable to the capital investment, which is 3.9 billion for the year. There's also a bit of increase in debt, which is purely foreign exchange valuation. So the debt looks a bit bigger in New Zealand dollar terms, but it's fully hedged, so that's not actually a real economic exposure.
That's good to know. And if we didn't want to increase that debt because of that capital, we would either have to kill $1.3 billion worth of capital, so stop investing, or put up the rates about 48% to pay it with cash.
Yes, I haven't done the maths on that, but yes, that's a significant order of magnitude. Rates would have to be half a big again, or something of that order of magnitude. Correct.
So you'd say that people criticising the increase in debt the quid pro quo was a 48% increase in rates if we wanted to continue the capital program as it is?
That's right, that's your choices. Massive increase in rates, or a whole lot less capital investment, or some other equally dramatic financial trade-off.
Thank you. And I wasn't around for the CAB decisions, but if we had still owned that building, the whole point of such a large discount on a purchase, as far as I read about it, was that it would have cost the council hundreds of millions of dollars to deal with the asbestos, deal with the heritage, upgrade the floors, replace the floors, etc., and that liability is not on our books. That's why the payment was so low, wasn't it? Because
I think, Councillor, we might treat that as rhetorical.
Okay, but I mean, it's an important one because this comes up every few months, and I wasn't here, but my understanding, and it would be good to have it confirmed, is the high-level purchase deal was because it was saving us well over $100 million that we would have had to spend if we continued to own.
That's moot. It was about the historical decision to make that plain building into historical. That was what drove that. Okay, I've got Councillor Bartley, and that's all I've got at the stage.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Worship. Are we taking 8 and 9 together or separately?
When I woke up this morning, I thought that'd be a good idea.
Okay.
But then again, I was told that the museum are going to show up and they had some time limits. And so I might have to resurrect that decision and perhaps go for 8, finish now, bring on the museum, and then go to 9. But a lot of the questions, 8 and 9 are quite similar. They sort of go together in a lot of ways. But I didn't realise that questions were almost compulsory.
Yeah.
And so if we do it again, and a lot of those questions would have just as easily gone to 9.
Yeah.
So with your, so it's a very good question. I'm faced with a choice now of doing what I wouldn't do, which is perhaps breaking and listening to the museum. It'd better be bloody interesting.
Oh, yeah. I'll do my question first for 8 then.
Eh?
I'll just go for my question for 8, for item 8.
Go for 8.
Yeah, thank you. My question is around the CCO transition, and also we're seeing the water care financial separation. So I just wanted to know, with this new system we're going in with water care, are our political accountability measures fit for purpose for this new structure we're going in, or do we need to amp it up? Because I'm worried they've borrowed a lot more money, and in the end, it's probably going to be consumers who pay. So that's where I'm going with my question. Do we need to amp up our political accountability measures to adjust to this new system of financial independence for water care?
In the round, my advice would probably be no, although in the sense that you've got a number of levers now: statement of intent, ability to appoint directors, and so forth. So I think you've got the right tools there. Operating those tools sort of diligently is really the challenge, and I am confident we can do that. You can do that. I also reflect that there is also the fact of quite a bit of regulation on water care as well. The discipline of the Commerce Commission being in there, having the charter, having work required to be done to satisfy them in terms of the adequacy of their capital investment program, their pricing policies, and so on. So I think, you know, to be frank, water care is a pretty well regulated entity with the combo of those two things. But of course, we can turn our mind to that through the CCO committee as well, in terms of the exercise of those roles.
Good question. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you. Just on the back of that, as the lead councillor for water care, there's a lot of bosses on that organisation now, so I think there's a lot of things to think about in what Councillor Bartley just said. Who's got primacy on this?
Fair point. I take that on board.
It is heavily regulated with DIA in there as well, so it'd be a tragic error. It'd have to get through a lot of hurdles to emerge. But you're right. You have to keep alert when you go there to those meetings. At this stage here.
Your Worship, I'm mindful we're at the end of questions, sorry. If you just indulge me, I just want to acknowledge that David Rankin is with us. It is his last day in the wider organisation tomorrow. Having wound Ike Panuku up at the end of June, David, I think you're aware, has been supporting with the transition work very valuably so. So I just want to personally thank him and acknowledge the fact of this being very close to his last time in the council group.
Okay, thank you for that. At this stage, we will move. Is that moved and seconded? I'll move that and seconded by the Deputy Mayor that we receive the Chief Executive and the Chief Finance Officer report, item 8. Item 9 is actually the quarterly,
If it's moved and seconded, is there opportunity to speak?
Yeah, I'm just, there's opportunity for me just to say before I go to a vote that what I'm going to do next, item 9 is quite similar, but I am prepared to interrupt and have the museum first, and then after we've moved and seconded and voted upon this, because quite a lot of the questions could easily have been about 9, so if you feel you didn't have a go this last time, and I'll save up my questions about property sales for 9. So now, a little bit of debate. You remove yourself from the planet, please, there. And Councillor Darby.
The Chief Executive has reminded us, and I had a glance, and yes, he is here. Mr. Rankin is here. Look, I just wanted to take the opportunity, because I haven't said this publicly, I really acknowledge your very long and absolutely committed period of service, David. You are one of the most remarkable Chief Executives I've come across, but you're not just a Chief Executive, you're a leadership in your own unique mould, and you've led the people of Ikepanuku who love you to bits, will go that extra mile and have gone that extra mile. I really, I know what you've achieved in that area of Ikepanuku and the other areas that you've led and worked in as well. I really do take my hat off to you, and I am really taken by your brand of leadership. It's quite unique, and I hope it's a brand that endures across this organisation and others that you might find yourself in. I'm sure it will be, and I wish you the best. You've left an indelible mark on Auckland. The spaces that you've created through your team, your leadership, incredible. And I've worked with you closely. We've achieved some stuff that we never thought we'd maybe get across the line, but it needed joined up leadership. But I could not have done it, David, as a councillor, be it Takapuna or Northcote and the many other areas when I was planning committee chair, without you and your backing. You backed this council, you backed it really hard, and the product is enormous. I really bow my head to you. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you for that. Councillor Footy.
Kia ora, thank you, and I want to just add my voice as well to congratulating you, David, and thanking you on behalf of the Manukau ward, and I know that my fellow councillor is listening online, but in particular for the very, very good work that Ikepanuku did with our local board in the Transform Manukau space and in the Papatoetoe space. I know other councillors haven't had the same experience, but for me, when I was chair of the local board, and certainly when I became councillor, I've always had a really good working relationship with Ikepanuku. I've always appreciated your excellent team out there, Richard Davison and the others who've worked really hard alongside the local board to truly transform Manukau. Manukau today, compared to 2013 when I first came on the board, is transformed and continuing to transform. So I thank you for your innovative leadership. I thank you for always being open to the different ideas and diverse ideas that were put to you through the team that you have out in Manukau and in Otara Papatoe and Maangele Otahu. I wish you well on your future endeavours. I hope that you will have a nice long break somewhere sunny with your whānau as well. Kia ora. Thank you.
Councillor Sayers, please.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, I just wanted to, I guess, just reinforce in terms of the financial pressures that Aucklanders are under at the moment, and the real importance of the need for us as elected members next term, whoever that ends up being, to hold the line on that 8.8% rate increase. The public actually won't care what mayor or what councillors made the decisions around the CRL. That's a done deal. But there's probably is an importance that if we know that is coming, that's communicated, and that may be something that we need to do a good job at. And that's why I want to mention that, Phil. And the other thing too is just, it can be very tempting, and this might be part of our own induction process for the new councillors around, when because everyone will make election promises, what they want to deliver on, but every 0.1% or 0.05% or 1% pressure just adds on to that projected 8.8%. So councils, will be tempted to add new services and will be tempted to add new projects. But if that happens, we really need to hold the line on that 8.8 or do better. So there'll need to be compromises made around that. So I just want to mention both those things in terms of what needs to happen early, probably after the election cycle. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move that we receive those. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. I'd welcome the museum people to the front. And just record your notes for item 9. If you've just note that have you asked an item 9 question already, you don't have